Okay, here we go. So this class tonight actually is at the suggestion of Patty, and she was asking about sentience and consciousness and so forth, which we really had kind of walked around. We hadn't dealt with it, but why not? Let's give it a shot. So here we go. I'm going to put up some PowerPoint here. Let's see what's going on. I have to get this out of the way. Go to here. Go to here. Okay, so we're going to try and talk here about sentience, which is a step below consciousness, many people feel. And then we're going to talk about what I'm simply going to call meta-mathematics, which is above mathematics. So this all comes under the general category of something that emerges. So when we talk about sentience, or we talk about consciousness, what we're actually saying is that we start off with just some atoms of different sorts, with hydrogen and carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and on, and they somehow clump together and form a creature. It might be a fish, it might be an ant, whatever it is, and that exhibits sentience. That it actually seems to have some higher level understanding than just eating, sleeping, and so forth. And when you get a step beyond that, it emerges into what we call consciousness, which we still don't understand. So many of the ideas we're dealing with here are really on the edge of philosophy, and they're on the edge of what I would say science is trying to deal with at the same time. So because of that, what I did was I went back and I looked at a very interesting fundamental paper by a guy named Harold Burr in 1935 at Yale. And Burr was arguing the following, that we have in the West, in science in particular, we have this view of science involving physics at the bottom, and physics is the most fundamental because it deals with these particles, and the particles make up everything. When we build on top of physics, we get to chemistry. So chemistry, we deal with the particles forming atoms and groups of atoms. So we end up with elements, and we end up with all kinds of materials and so forth. And then we go on top of that to biology, where the materials, the conglomerations of things start to exhibit sentience and consciousness. So if you think about this, it all started with the physics, if you believe what the West says. Well, if it starts with physics and these particles, then I think what we've seen so far is that all of that is based on electromagnetism. That is, that we have the electricity, and the magnetism generates these fields that together interact with one another, and they give us these different forces that we've seen. So in electromagnetism, we saw that opposites attract and likes repel. So negatives repel negatives, positives repel positives, and negatives and positives attract one another. And that's how it works. But when we get onto very close distances, it turns out that it flips, and we end up with a different type of force, which physics calls the strong force, but it's actually the force is flipping so that likes attract. So we have protons in nuclei attracting one another, which normally they wouldn't do because they're positively charged. And we have neutrons in the nucleus decaying through what's simply called the weak force. They decay into a proton, an electron, and a neutrino. So, and gravity is a consequence of this, because it deals with how space itself is deformed. So everything is involved with electromagnetism. And yet, if we go look today at modern biology, there's virtually no discussion of electromagnetism in consciousness, in sentience, in health, in doing anything. It's entirely really based on chemistry. No electromagnetism whatsoever. And so we're going to come back to that, and we're going to see what happens. But what Burr argued was the following: that if we go back and look at the Greeks didn't have the technology that we have, but they had their minds. And so we had Euclid, who tried to summarize a lot of geometry that Pythagoras and other people had put together. And we had besides geometry, we had mathematics, which by itself the Greeks were very strong in, and the notion was that geometry and mathematics kind of subsumed everything. They were everywhere, and they drove everything. But the Greeks couldn't really go beyond that because they were just talking about it. Didn't have any technology to be able to measure any of these things or check them out in different ways. And so what happened was, as we progressed into the Renaissance and then the Enlightenment, that we had people like Newton come up, and he said, well, it isn't everything that matters. We have to look at the piece parts. And so the piece parts are these globs of matter, and they attract one another through a force called gravity. And this led to a different view of things, where you looked at all the piece parts, and that led to the advances in Western science. But it took you away from this notion of geometry and mathematics as being the basic stuff, and it made physics much more what was the base. So what we're going to see here in tonight is we're going to swing back toward where mathematics and what goes with it is actually much more fundamental than physics. So let's take a look and see what happens here. Here's our outline. We're going to cover these topics, and we'll come back to this. So the first one is this topic of emergence, which has come into popularity in the last several decades in physics. So let's see what it is. In philosophy and systems theory, in science and art, emergence occurs when a complex entity has properties or behaviors that its parts do not have on their own, and it only emerges, hence the word emergent, when they interact in a wider whole. So this is where life comes about, or this is where sentience and consciousness come about, is that this emerges out of these parts into a wider whole, so that we end up with a thinking creature, whatever. The two people that I have here up in the corner, this is Stuart Kaufman, who has a number of books on this at the Santa Fe Institute that was created in the 1980s in Santa Fe to deal with things like this, because it wasn't being dealt with by mainstream science. And this other guy here is Phil Anderson, who was at Bell Labs and received the Nobel Prize in Physics for some really fundamental theoretical work that he did that was validated time and again with all kinds of experiments. So he did fundamental work in what we today call string theory. He probably created it. He did fundamental work in superconductivity and on and on. And he's I'll just as an aside, I remember, every so often I would go over and have lunch with a physicist that I knew. And one time Anderson showed up for lunch, and he started asking all these questions about this particular area of physics. And I was listening to these questions, and I was asking myself, boy, this guy really doesn't know anything. He's asking, like really basic questions and going through this. And so then I find out, like 2 or 3 years later, he got this award for this paper he wrote, where he went back and he questioned all the basic issues that were in this particular area and pointed out all these contradictions and how they were wrong and how they should be viewed this way rather than that way. And everybody dropped everything and said, my God, you're right. We've totally messed up in terms of what we're doing. So that's the sort of person that Anderson was. He would just think outside the box all the time. And he loved this term of emergence. Superconductivity is an example where you have a material and you cool it, and as it gets cold enough, all of a sudden the material has no electrical resistance. So the current that flows in it literally has no, it doesn't heat up anything. There's no resistance whatsoever in the current flow. And this just emerges out of a particular phenomenon there. It turns out that the basic idea is that the flow of electricity involves electrons. When you cool them enough, the electrons pair up with one another. Now, remember, what I said was that likes repel one another. So electrons are negative, so electrons shouldn't repel one another, which happens, but at a low enough temperature, they attract one another. And that's what makes it possible for this superconductivity phenomenon to take place. So this is a phenomenon that occurs at this very low temperature, and it just emerges out of nowhere. And people are still studying this today, trying to get the temperature to be closer and closer to room temperature, so they can exploit it to do all kinds of things. So here at a little video that we've got of emergence, and let's see if we can show it. Hold on 1 second. I wondered about this. Here's my video, and it doesn't want to show.
Non-emergent. What if you click on that?
Nope, that didn't work. Hold on. We're going to get out of this, and we're going to go find the video. Where did the video go?
That looks more promising. Click on
Hold on a second.
Why don't you click on that arrow?
No. Wait, what did you say? Click on the arrow?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Every now and then he listens to me.
I didn't see the arrow. You saw it. Nope. Nope, we're going to have to go. That didn't work. So here we go. I'm going to have to go over to YouTube and pull it up. Hold on a second. Patty, we're just getting into this. We're dealing, you're just in time. We're starting to deal with something called emergence, which is going to be critical toward understanding. Hold on 1 sec while I fix this.
It's pretty stupid.
Okay, here we go. Up and away. How do we get into this?
Hi there. Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're okay. We're talking about emergence. And this video is going to give you an introduction to emergence. This will lead into how consciousness and sentience arise. They emerge out of nothing. You have inert matter, and all of a sudden, the matter becomes sentient or even conscious. So here we go. We're going to give this a try.
An ant is pretty stupid. It doesn't have much of a brain, no will, no plan. And
Can everybody
yet,
hear this?
many ants together are smart.
Yes.
Okay,
An ant colony can construct complex structures. Some colonies keep farms of fungi. Others take care of cattle. They can wage war or defend themselves. How is this possible? How can a bunch of stupid things do smart things together? This phenomenon is called emergence, and it's one of the most fascinating and mysterious features of our universe. In a nutshell, it describes small things forming bigger things that have different properties than the sum of their parts. Emergence is complexity arising from simplicity, and emergence is everywhere. Water has vastly different properties to the molecules that make it up, like the concept of wetness. Take wet fabric. If you zoom in far enough, there is no wetness. There are just molecules sitting in the spaces between the atoms of the cloth. Wetness is an emerging property of water, something new, only created by a lot of individual interactions between water molecules. And this is sort of it. Many things interact under a certain set of rules, creating something above and beyond themselves. It turns out that more is different. This different property is itself a new thing, and that new thing can couple with other new things to repeat the process. You can imagine this as layers stacked upon each other, every layer made from more complex parts. Atoms form molecules, molecules form proteins, proteins make up cells. Cells make up organs, parts. How do ants form the sort of cloudy entity that is a colony? By following a rule set that produces order through chaos. For example, let's look at how an ant colony distributes jobs. Let's assume that a colony should have 25% workers, 25% caretakers, 25% soldiers, and 25% gatherers. Ants communicate their current job via chemicals. For example, a worker ant constantly secretes chemicals that say, "I'm a worker." When ants meet other ants, they smell each other to gather information, telling each other their job and what they're doing. Both keep track of who they met in the past. Now, imagine an anteater kills most of the gatherers. If this isn't fixed quickly, the colony will starve. Many worker ants need to switch jobs, but how do you tell this to thousands of them? Simple, you don't. Our worker ant will still meet and smell other ants, but it will encounter almost no gatherers at all. It counts too few gatherers until it reaches a critical point, and then it changes its job. The worker becomes a gatherer. Other ants will do the same until after a while there are enough gatherers again. The balance is restored all by itself. The actions and interactions of an individual are random. You can't plan which ant will encounter which other ant, but the simple set of rules is so elegant that a colony's many operations emerge as a consequence. On an even more fundamental level, hundreds of millions of complicated molecules interact to maintain a robust and amazing structure. A being with vastly different properties than the sum of its dead parts emerges. The smallest unit of life, a cell. We still don't have a clear definition of what living things are, we just know they emerge from things that are not alive. Cells combine and cooperate. They specialize and respond to one another, and over time, we develop into complex organisms with remarkable capacities. Your arms and legs and heart are an incredibly complex and complicated system made of trillions of individual stupid things. And yet we breathe, digest, and watch YouTube videos. How do your cells know what to do? Think of the pacemaker cells in your heart. Billions of them need to send out an impulse just at the right moment to collectively create a heartbeat. Our cells exchange chemical information with their neighbor cells to see what they're up to, and then decide what to do. If it's among a lot of cells that are working on the same task, it will start working on that task as well and sync up with them. There is no mastermind giving commands, just single units communicating with their neighbors and acting according to the feedback they get. What about our most important part? What is the thing that asks these kinds of questions? Is our consciousness then an emergent property of the cells in our brain? This question is too big and important. It deserves a video of its own. Some things that emerge are hard to define. You can't touch an ant colony, only its parts. It has neither brain, nor face, nor body. And yet the colony interacts with the world. Just like colonies emerge from ants, things emerge from humans, like nations. What actually is a nation? Is it its population? Is it its institutions? Its symbols like its flag, colors, or anthems? The physical things it makes like cities? The territory it occupies? All of these things are fluid. Populations change and are replaced. Institutions come and go. Cities can be constructed and abandoned. Borders have changed all the time for most of history. And symbols get replaced by new symbols. A nation has no face, no brain, no body. Are nations not real then? Of course they are. Just like ant colonies, nations interact with the world. They can change landscapes, wage wars, grow or decline, and they can stop existing. But they only exist because of a lot of humans interacting with each other. But not just nations. All the complex structures that surround us emerge from us. Even if we don't intend to, we are constantly creating communities, companies, cities, societies. All of these things are entities that have fundamentally different properties and abilities than the pretty stupid apes they emerged from. We don't know why any of this happens. We just observe it, and it seems to be a fundamental property of our universe. It may be the most beautiful and wondrous property of our universe.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here if I can. Let's see. There's a couple of takeaways on this. One thing is that apparently very simple rules can lead to, very complicated behavior. And the other thing is that these rules could be distributed everywhere. They had it. Every ant has, the same set of rules, but that doesn't mean that, one ant ends up being a worker and one ant is a warrior and one ant is a gatherer and so forth. That comes out of the set of rules that each of them have. So that the basic idea here is there's a set of algorithms that are relatively simple, but they're everywhere. And this is apparently what could be going on when Bruce's brother Ron looked into what we called information. We talked about this double slit experiment and how the electron in the experiment was covered with blocks of information that were constantly scanning. And when they detected it change, then the electron would change. So back again, depending on what was going on. But the net of it was a simple set of rules, and they could be checked out by lots of people independently. The rules are really there, but it led to very complicated behavior, such as having an electron be both a wave and a particle. So let's get into this a little bit more. Let's see. Here we go. What we're talking about here is naturally when you get into these things, they come up with refinements on what's going on. So there's what's called weak emergence, which is what we're dealing with here, and then there's strong emergence, of course, which is what we're not going to deal with. But the basic idea is in weak emergence, you'd have some sort of computer simulation that would, for example, I want to simulate a flight of birds or a school of fish or how galaxies form. And I have a simple set of algorithms, and I run the simulation and I see what happens here. Does this match what I really see? So the interacting members, are all independent of one another. If there's no central control of any of this, they're all doing their own thing. But there's some new emergent properties that could emerge, which is called strong emergence. And it's argued that this can't be simulated, analyzed, or reduced. Many people call this magic. So we're not going to deal with that here. We're just going to try and deal with what we saw going on. So just to go back to what we started with the physics, we have this so-called standard model in physics that's been around for 50 years for matter. And it includes, there's electrons, but electrons have three flavors to them shown here. These are actually resonances of one electron. So there's really only one electron and two other resonances. There's one neutrino and two resonances for that. So there's an electron, a neutrino, and then we have these quarks. There's an up quark and a down quark. And again, two resonances for each of the up and down quarks. So we have two types of quarks, an electron and a neutrino, and that makes up what we call particles, or these are what are called fermions. If you look up here, you'll see the word fermion. And then we go over here to fields, which are called bosons. And so we have this funny one, this Higgs boson, that is involved in scaling the relative mass of the electron, neutrino, up and down quark. The masses of these things, the ratios of their masses, is governed by this Higgs boson. Don't ask me why. It just comes out of this so-called emergent phenomena. And then we have a photon here, and then the photon has different flavors to give us strong force, weak force, and gravity. Okay, but really, it's probably that they're all just one type of photon here. So this Higgs boson is the one that's funny. This is what we see. So the fundamental things driving all this are all electromagnetic. We have electromagnetism being generated by the electron and by these up and down quarks. We don't know if there's any charge on these neutrinos, so we ignore that, and we can't find any charge on the photon. So all of the real action here in physics is electromagnetism, which leads to chemistry, where we have elements, which in turn leads to biology. But in all the biology that we've been looking at, there's no discussion of electromagnetism, and yet it all starts with the physics. So there's something that for whatever reason, modern Western biology chooses to ignore here. The standard model here that we're dealing with is in fact itself emergent, and it's emergent because it has these holes that I talked about in the Clavial manifolds, and that results in these resonances that occur here, which are leading to this emergent property. So that's something to keep in mind. We're going to skip over strong emergence. I put it in here to just for sake, but again, because of these physicists, this guy here, Laughlin, is at Stanford, and he did this work at Bell Laboratories where I met him. He's very big on emergence, describing everything. The problem is he hasn't been able to use it to explain anything that I'm aware of here. However, it is very useful in superconductivity and other things that appears that will be useful. We just haven't found any here. So anyway, that's what we're going to do on emergence. We're going to keep this in mind, and whatever we deal with is going to emerge. So sentience is the first thing that we come to in terms of emergence. So this is the ability here to experience feelings and sensations. We're dealing here now really with philosophy. So this term was coined by Western philosophers in the 1630s. Sentience is Latin for feeling, and it distinguishes it from thinking, which is reason. Okay, but the thing about sentience is that it arises in, for example, animals of all sorts or plants. They experience feelings and sensations here that have been documented, and so this is something that emerges out of what is supposedly inert matter. It is what it is, and the ability to do this leads to these sensations. The Asian side of things has the same concepts here, but different nuances to them, and then of course in science fiction they confuse everything here with sentience, consciousness, self-awareness, and sapience. But sentience is kind of the lowest rung on this thing. So the Eastern view, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, recognize non-humans as sentient. So we go into Sanskrit and we see these terms, Jantu, Bahujana, Jagat, Sattva, and these refer to the mass of living things that are subject to illusion, suffering, and rebirth, or samsara. In some forms of Buddhism, plants, stones, and other inanimate objects are considered to be sentient. Bruce, what would you say about that? Have you encountered that?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So some people apparently have incarnated as stones.
Yeah,
I
it wasn't part of the teaching I was involved with.
don't know why you'd want to incarnate as a stone, other than it's probably pretty quiet. No, I understand. In Jainism, there's a soul that is viewed as what's really sentient, but there are some things that are without a soul, such as a chair or a spoon. But there's a lot of things that do have soul. For example, water is a sentient being, and it possesses only one sense, that of touch. And in Jainism and Hinduism, this is related to the concept of ahimsa, or nonviolence toward other beings. So, why wouldn't you want to be nonviolent? Why? What is your issue here? In Buddhism, according to this source, there's 6 senses, not just 5. The 6th one being the subjective experience of the mind. So the sentience is simply the awareness prior to the rising of what I would call enlightenment, or loss of self. And an animal qualifies as a sentient being, and sentient beings that are just pure consciousness aren't themselves possible. Those are we would postulate that those entities that are pure consciousness would reside in these higher realms that we saw in these Calabi-Yau manifolds. They're totally energetic, pure consciousness. In this Mahayana Buddhism, which supposedly includes Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, you have an enlightened being devoted to the liberation of others. And so the first vow is that sentient beings are numberless. I vow to free them. So wherever I come across this, I try and free them. So this is a particular set of views out of the East. Let's take a look at the West. The West, as always, was doing its own thing, coming out of the Enlightenment here in this time period. This is post-Renaissance. The sentience is the ability to experience sensations, and that's that's really all the further they got, and so somehow consciousness is going to be a step above this. So now we turn to Jung, and we try and relate this to his notion of the collective unconsciousness. So in Buddhism, if we would spend time meditating, we would lose our notion of self, and we would we would connect into this collective unconsciousness and sense, the true reality that's out there that encompasses everything. So Jung wrote about this in 1916 and coined these terms, this notion of collective unconsciousness, but also populated this with instincts and archetypes. And examples of these archetypes were the great mother, the wise old man, the shadow, the tower, water, and the tree of life. And there's many more. So these archetypes are out there, and they end up influencing us, and we in turn apparently influence them. There's a linkage that occurs here between the personal consciousness. This is different than the personal unconscious of Freudian psychoanalysis. This is Jung splitting from Freud and arguing that this collective unconsciousness is really much more fundamental than anything that Freudian psychoanalysis would come up with. So the idea here,
It also, I just would say that's not quite right, because Freudian psychology talks about the personal subconscious, whereas in Jungian psychology, the unconscious is also superconscious. So it's not only the subconscious, and certainly not only the personal subconscious,
right?
which is just, according to Freud, where all your repressed impulses are hiding out, whether you want to make love to your mother or kill her, that's all
Right.
in your personal subconscious. But in Jung, your intuition is above your conscious mind, not below it.
Right. There are other terms that show up: autonomous psyche, objective psyche, that are more commonly used today than the term collective unconsciousness. They feel that they capture the concept better. And then again, there are people that just attack it because they say it's very difficult to test this due to this mystical aspect, that you really only achieve this through deep meditation. You only, that's when you link up with this collective unconscious. So that's where Jung started, 1916. This is in terms of what he wrote. Who knows when he started thinking about this? So then let's see, let me skip a, where do we go? So now Jung wrote some more, going up into in his essay in 1916, he wrote about the structure of the unconsciousness, but then in 1929, he went beyond this and started dealing with dreams, fantasies, and other exceptional states of mind. End up with these mythological motifs and symbols that can appear at any time, often as a result of particular influences, traditions, etc., but more often without any sign of them. And these primordial archetypes, as he calls them, belong to the unconscious psyche, cannot be explained as simple personal acquisitions, but they make up that which has been called the collective unconscious. And so Jung is trying to refine and iterate on what he was initially talking about here, and he's given it some more thought. The thing that comes out of this is there's an influence that compromises the consciously, continually striving to lead all conscious processes back into the old paths. Okay, so the collective unconsciousness by itself comprises the psychic life of our ancestors right back to our earliest beginnings. Bruce, you got any comments on any of this? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I have a slightly different perspective. When you do a lot of deeper meditation, when you have, there's different levels of awareness and understanding that arise. And what happens is that there's a major transformation occurs. So when you have a level of insight at those levels of the mind, it changes everything. So I mean, for example, the idea of having the self it's like having a self is a major problem in terms of experience. One of the consequences is that everything is considered separate. There is a subject object. The self is the subject and everything else is an object. Well, you can get into a level of awareness where that simply disappears. And you find out that the universe is in union. There is no separation. And it's a different understanding of reality altogether. So I just trying to emphasize that when you go deeper into meditation, there's deeper levels of realization that changes everything totally. So that's kind of a perspective that's not part of this.
Right. No, it's not here. That's why I was asking. Jung did some more in 1936, where he gave a lecture. And in addition to our immediate consciousness, which is thoroughly personal in nature, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. And this collective unconsciousness does not develop individually, but it is inherited and consists of these pre-existent forms or archetypes, which can only become conscious secondarily and which give definite form to certain psychic contents. The Freud called some of these things archaic remnants, mental forms whose presence cannot be explained by anything in the individual's own life, which seem to be aboriginal, innate, and inherited. And Jung pointed to Freud with his theories here of the primal horde about totemism and taboos and so forth, trying to give some independent validation to these ideas. So here you just see Jung is evolving these ideas. Again, it's difficult to, if we look at this against what Bruce just described, for example, there's no real notion here of achieving this notion of loss of self or this enlightenment that it would occur here. It's absent. In fact, have you noticed any archetypes, Bruce, floating around? Any sort of things like a mother element, or you tell me.
Well, in terms of deeper levels of awareness, it doesn't seem to work that way. My main experience is what I call heart mind. You see love reality, which is a union experience, is everywhere, and so there's no separation.
Right. Yeah. This is. I'm just trying to give you a picture here. Here is what Jung is doing. We're dealing with stuff that is very much on the frontier of anything here, and it goes into philosophy, and it goes into mysticism and spirituality very deeply. The one thing that Ron observed was the notion of these blocks of information that controlled everything. So apparently very simple algorithms that are everywhere are involved with the creation of these fundamental particles and energies in physics which leads to what we call chemistry with the elements and materials, which leads to biology. But Ron also observed over here what he would call mind forms or dark matter. So there were things here that were particles, but there's no electron over here in this, unlike what we have. And so the difference here is that we end up with different entities. It's a nuclear chemistry because these subquarks are just going to be combining in different ways. And he had pictures of different branching trees. And this finally led to this notion of what he called a mind form, or an entity that would be in living effectively forever, but it would be in one of two states. It would be either quiescent, it could just be floating through space, just doing nothing, or it could be sentient or active, which means it landed on a planet or a star and started to receive energy by the vibrations, the mechanical gravitational vibrations of that hot entity and this piece of dark matter, and that brought it to life and so forth. But these things are around since the start of the universe. Okay, over here, the things that are around since the start of the universe are these subquarks and electrons and so forth. Over here, these mind forms have been around forever. They're built up of the same things, but they are what they are. And the other thing that Ron came up with was this notion of the geometry of the universe with 24 spatial dimensions, which is a hint that there's some really underlying structure here, that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's really going on. And it can be displayed in different ways. But it has these interesting subspaces for matter, for dark matter, and for energetic beings in these 18 dimensions here that are all compactified dimensions. So this is all part of what it means to be sentient. You can have beings that are entirely energetic here, that are living here, and that's what they choose to do. And then you can have some of them that choose to incarnate and link up with some entities here that are in our world. I just put in some other things just to show you, to stress test the thinking here. So in the Kabbalah, you end up with this notion that God began the process of creation by contracting his, you want to say, Or Ein Sof, an infinite light, in order to allow for conceptual space in which something where finite and independent realms could exist. So to put it differently, God wanted to learn, wanted to go beyond where things are at. So he created probably a number of universes. We're just one of them. And the end result of this was that you end up with having simultaneously this divine presence, which is God, but also this absence, which is the vacuum in between these universes here. And so this by itself leads to a different idea of sentience or consciousness, which is what this God is doing and creating through this contraction, these independent universes that themselves are going to have evolutions of sentience and consciousness. So anyway, that was one thing. We finally get to consciousness, okay? So consciousness, which, and again, no one knows what consciousness is, but we're trying to articulate it. People think of it as awareness of internal and external existence. They think of a little man who's behind your eyes, and that man is looking out through your eyes, and it sees things outside, but it also senses things inside where the little man is. Okay, that's not meant to be any sort of valid explanation, but it's trying to capture this notion of a separation of internal and external existence, but that hasn't sorted out really in any fundamental way what is consciousness. Okay, what do you need to study to say that you're studying consciousness? Okay, some people claim it's synonymous with the mind, and other times with just aspects of the mind. Okay, people do all of these magnetic resonant imaging of signals running through your brain, through the neurons and the glia that are in your brain, and they see these things light up and shut down and so forth. Is that consciousness? Well, it's something, but I don't know that I would call that consciousness. The other words that come up are thought, imagination, volition, cognition, experience, feelings, perception, awareness or self-awareness, and how all these things evolve or change over time. So that's where we come up with consciousness. So let's go to today, where we've talked about this individual, Stephen Wolfram, and he's come up with an algorithmic model for space-time. He's come up with an algorithmic model for space-time that he thinks he can construct all of physics out of some very basic, simple rules, which is what we were talking about at the very start, so that everything that we see would emerge out of this set of basic, simple rules. It might occur in a 26 dimensional space, 24 spatial dimensions, and 2 for time. But it is what it is. And in doing this, though, this would raise the question of, well, where is consciousness in all this? Now that you've been able to do all this mathematics and mathematical physics, he's gone through a lot of different things and starting to think about this. I think part of the problem is he's so hung up on his Western science physics side of things that he hasn't given enough thought to the Eastern side of things and the notion of loss of self, and that there are going to be levels of consciousness, levels of sentience that occur here, or what we saw at the beginning was just the Greek notion of mathematics and geometry being central, rather than the notion of particles or parts being fundamental here. But this is a work in progress. Okay, he's arguing that there's computation occurring because these information blocks, as Ron saw, are everywhere. They're in every space compartment out there, and so that leads to the possibility for an incredible computational power to go do these things. Let me go back one. Skipped over this. Wolfram likes the idea from physics of statistical mechanics, where you have lots of individual molecules interacting with one another, and that creates the notion of pressure and temperature and things like that. Okay, so out of really nothing, you end up with something. In particular, you come up with the first and second laws of thermodynamics. So having said that, that's really, I think, just the start of the story. And there's a lot of other things out there. We saw, for example, that water was viewed as something that could be sentient in some sense, that it had a sense of feel to it, touch, and so forth. So that's absent from this point of view here. And he continues to flog this, to come up with this sort of picture here what he called this computational irreducibility, but then he had many different things that were reducible here, different things that could be computed, and they led to what would be called the received laws of physics. That's where he's heading with all this. I think he'll make a lot of progress toward this. I don't know that he'll get all the way to where he wants to, and in particular toward what consciousness is all about. There's a different view to all this stuff, which I came across due to Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is one of the giants in psychoanalysis. He's an Austrian psychiatrist, and he spent a good stint of time in World War II in 4 different concentration camps. And he developed this ability. He looked into the eyes of the people there that were in the camps, and he observed basically that those that had a meaning in life were the ones that were going to survive, and those that were going to die were those that had lost all meaning in life. They just given up everything, and they were just going to be murdered in the gas chambers. This is something above and beyond the thing that the Buddha talks about here, or Jesus of Nazareth, is the meaning in life is a lot of it has to do with love and compassion for yourself and for others, and this linkage that links up to other people. Frankl just says, look, I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to pick some basic techniques. There's clients observed to overcome obsessions by self-distancing themselves by humorous exaggeration. Okay, so they end up curing themselves of their issues through paradoxes here. They deflect things by drawing their attention away from their symptoms, or they have a Socratic dialogue, and this leads them to asking questions that allow them to identify and pursue their own self-defined meaning in life. And he clearly is pushing for the third one as the way to go, but the others are also ways to go. And this has helped from looking at what he was talking about. A lot of people with their mental health issues, and it's been endorsed by a variety of people. Frankl is felt to be, I put it here at the bottom, he's viewed as a peer of Freud, Jung, and Adler. Adler was the other Viennese psychiatrist who had his own school there of psychiatry. So coming out of Vienna, we had 4 different people. So here's yet another approach, which, and again, this would be an emergent approach here to all of this, that we're gonna follow what the Greeks said about geometry and mathematics. So metamathematics is the study of mathematics itself using mathematical methods. So we get meta theories, which are mathematical theories about other mathematical theories. Okay, this all came about when this guy up here in the corner, David Hilbert, tried to secure the foundations of mathematics by putting it onto an axiomatic basis. So just like with Euclid, we had a set of axioms, and that put geometry onto a very sound footing. But then people realized that the axioms themselves were open to discussion, and by changing the axioms, they ended up with different geometries, far beyond what Euclid ever thought of. A thing to keep in mind here is, and this is what happened with Hilbert, was we start with this one statement here. This statement is false. So we focus on this as a meta-mathematical statement. Okay, well, this is outside of conventional logic. Okay, why is that? Well, if it's false, then it's true. Okay, if it's true, then it's false, or conventional mathematical logic would allow us to deal with. And there's other examples of this here, but mathematics appears to give us the framework or the language for actually describing what's going on, and it appears to be intimately coupled to the world around us. Here we have a different person, Eugene Wigner, who argued in 1952 in a widely cited paper that there are these physical concepts that we perceive, and isn't it amazing that mathematics and physics seem to do such a great job? In fact, it's unreasonable what a great job that mathematics and physics do. And how in the world do we explain this? That mathematics, so why is mathematics such a natural language that's so matched for explaining what's going on? Well, it could be that the mathematics is itself the algorithms that someone like Stephen Wolfram is looking for, and these algorithms are in fact mathematics. So the match is perfect. That the rules that we come up with and for describing these things that we call mathematics and physics are in fact built into the structure of the universe. There's a different example of this that gives some credence to that. In 1967, Robert Langlands, who's shown here, decided that there were diverse areas of mathematics that really weren't that far separated from one another. So he looked at algebraic number theory. He looked at representation theory of groups, of the study of symmetries, and he looked at number theory and geometry. And he started to pose very sharp mathematical assertions linking these areas. And if someone said there was a linkage between number theory and geometry or symmetry or this algebraic number theory here, it was news. You know, no one had realized this, but it was staring them in the face. And so today, as we sit here, this push on this program that he outlined to link all these diverse areas of mathematics together is occupying the greatest number of mathematicians in history, and it's leading to hopefully some sort of grand unified theory of mathematics. And it's captured the attention of everybody. Bruce, you want to mute? There we go. There's a different example of emergence here than the one I just described. This individual here, Werner Ving, is a mathematician, but he also writes science fiction. And in the 1980s, he talked about the coming technological singularity. Okay, that we're striving to create ever more powerful electronic or biological intelligences. We have the development of artificial intelligence and computers. We have these networks of computers that are growing in numbers. Right now, there's over 8 billion computers that people can identify with. That's probably low. And there's at least 4 billion of them that are connected on the internet in some capacity. They have an internet address. And so all of these things are out there, and they're growing in their capabilities. And it could very well be that there's a flip that occurs, that all of a sudden these things all link up to one another and achieve what he would call super intelligence. And once that happens, well, then it's all over for human beings. You know, humans solve problems thousands of times faster than evolution, but super intelligence with all of these computers would solve problems thousands of times faster than any human would. And so, you know, beware what you wish for. And he's been arguing this for a number of years, and people don't know what to make of it, because if it's true, what do we do about it? And the answer is no one knows. So we'll see what happens. But this is an example of an emergent phenomenon, that all of a sudden all of this would achieve consciousness and then superintelligence, and then good luck. Okay. I touched on this before. I was talking about the biology side of things. So just to give you a little summary here, each human body that has roughly 50 trillion cells in it, we don't have any, we agree that the cell is the fundamental unit of the human body, but we really don't have any good model for how a cell works. It sounds crazy. It's absolutely fundamental. There it is. We just live with it. It's roughly negative 20 millivolts. If I go from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell, it's roughly minus 20 millivolts is the electric potential, and we have 50 trillion of these cells. So there's some electricity floating around here in the human body. Every human body does have some sort of electromagnetic field associated with it. And there's been a lot of studies on this. I just stacked them up here. Yale University had Harold Burr in 1935, who wrote some fundamental books. And I put his two books here that you can get on the web. They're stacked up on top. Syracuse University, Robert Becker, in the 1950s to 1980 or so, he wrote in 1985 a series of books. They're all stacked up here on what's going on. So, for example, Becker was showing that acupuncture actually is due to a low resistance pathways on your skin that connect different organs in the body to different parts of the skin. So you could have something on your toe that would connect to something in your brain. For example, if you put a needle into the toe, that would interact to do something in the brain, just as an example. And he tested all this. Becker also, for example, noticed that if you created a pure tone and generated this tone and gave someone some earphones, and they listened to this tone, that they would immediately go to sleep. And when your tone stopped, when they took the earphones off, then you'd wake up. So he had a way to create anesthesia without any drugs, just doing what the body was doing all by itself. This was avidly fought by the medical establishment. You never even hear about this. At Tufts University, the person doing the current work on this, Michael Levin, has published a book, but he has a website with all kinds of amazing things on it about salamanders and how things grow and consciousness and so forth. Paul Allen, who was one of the co-founders of Microsoft, gave Michael Levin $10 million a number of years ago and said, here, we want you not to worry about raising money. Just go use this money to attract graduate students and do your research. And that's what he's been doing ever since. So this, and as a different example, Michael Levin is in fact an immigrant out of Russia. He's Jewish in background, but you would never know it from listening to him. And he, as an example, he ended up interacting with the Russians developed for their cosmonauts machines that would generate different frequencies and would cure different illnesses, because the cosmonauts were in orbit and they had no way to sit there and help them cure whatever illness it was they had. So the Russians developed, several different machines that generated a variety of frequencies, and the combinations, it covers like 1,000 different diseases of all sorts that you can combat, and it apparently works. And so this is the sort of stuff that could come out of what we call the body electric here. So now let's see. I think we're approaching the end. There's one more thing just to show you how diverse this is. Here we have Roger Penrose, who's a Nobel laureate in theoretical physics, and he wrote a series of papers and then a book where he was arguing that consciousness actually is a phenomenon related to quantum mechanics. And it turns out that in your brain, there are entities called microtubules that are very small, and they apparently interact. They have signals that occur that would be on the scale of quantum signals, very short spatial dimensions. And this apparently could end up what he calls orchestrated objective reduction, which postulates that consciousness originates at the quantum level inside neurons, rather than the view that it's a product of connections between neurons. Okay, and again, this is something that would merit study. Of course, it goes against the conventional wisdom that you just take these pictures and of how the neurons react, and that's consciousness. He's arguing that that isn't consciousness, and so forth. So here we go. All of these things that are trying to walk around what is consciousness, and we're at a very early stage in trying to sort them out and determine what in the world is really going on here. But as you can see, it's an area of active study, and far be it from me to say what the winner and loser is in this thing. We clearly have a long way to go to sort all this out. Any comments? Patty, are you there?
I am. I was just thinking about consciousness compared to memories and function, because that's sort of the area that I'm involved in. And for instance, just talking about Alzheimer's, things like neurodegenerative type of diseases where they talk about plaques, which are between neurons, versus toxic proteins that cause problems that are deep within neurons. And what some of the newest going on at your alma mater and elsewhere that we're involved with, talk about the root cause of Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases as being inside of neurons. And I just wonder if all of that function and memory, how that relates to consciousness. And it's electromagnetic waves that seems to be doing the trick, possibly.
Yeah, it could very well be that by, again, learning to meditate, that you strengthen your soul, and that by itself energizes the body to cure itself, to get rid of the things that you're talking about. And there's examples of these Eastern mystics that have done this, that live for long periods of time. They eat nothing, they excrete nothing, they don't sleep, and they're just how are they doing this? Okay, it could be that this electromagnetic side of things, or getting your soul, you're getting being able to, and that the intrinsic biochemistry that you're dealing with is so complicated and everybody's unique. So there's different side effects that different people have to this, that, and the other thing. Why not let each person cure themselves? But it's just my own hobby horse, my own axe to grind in this, that so far, we haven't made as much progress as people would like to think. The reality is that there's still only, a very small fraction. There might be 20,000-30,000 diseases that we can identify right now, and out of them, and the number's undoubtedly growing as we get better instrumentation, and that we can probably only cure 1% of them, or 200 and 300 of them with these different drugs. So that means that they were missing 99% of it. And that to me suggests that you might want to take a look at another way of doing this. That you might have milked the easy way of doing it, but looking at this electromagnetic field phenomena and through meditation might be a far more fruitful way to do it.
They say that they just don't have these same degenerative diseases in the East. And I think a lot of it is energy medicine, like Reiki, like acupuncture. In the East, when somebody has a stroke, they get to work immediately. And they don't have the same long-term complete disability and paralysis that we have here. But they treat it very intensively. For Reiki, they go to Reiki clinics like 3 or 4 times a day, and there'll be a room with several people in it getting treated all at the same time, and they're benefiting from being together. The energy is kind of spreading around. And diet. I think heavy metals have a huge amount to do with these things. And they just don't see the same. Again, Alzheimer's seems to be, there's more and more about aluminum, and that's a deodorants, and all kinds of things, and our pots and pans, and, but I think it's a different mindset.
Yeah, let me just give you a different example of something that Marjorie and I have been looking at. So this is there's a technology for doing pulsed PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic waveform. Okay, so you take a mat and you put a bunch of magnets on it. You wrap wires around each of the magnets, and then each of the magnets is pulsed with a particular waveform. So what this does is it ends up torquing the iron in the red blood cells to stimulate it to move, but it also stimulates the electrons that are in the muscles that are stimulating the blood flow, that are squeezing the veins and arteries and microcapillaries to get the blood to flow. So the end result of this is that you get the body to get more good nutrients to the cells through good blood flow, plus you get the waste products coming out of this, okay? So there's a whole bunch of things. I just pulled up a competitive analysis just to show you. So there's different types of waveforms that people have tried, okay? There's, you can go to 1 to 30 hertz. So this is very low frequency, almost going into acoustic type things. There's the intensity of it, the duration of the pulse, the shape of the waveform, etc. So there's a bunch of these things. Hold on one second. Here, the one that we've been looking at is this thing out of Germany called Beamer. It has a very sophisticated waveform here that is different than the other ones. It's a very how to say it? It's a complex waveform, so it isn't just a simple sine wave or a simple triangle wave or a square wave or anything like that. It's an envelope which is low frequency, say 10 hertz, but then inside it there's a bunch of high frequency components there that are also in there, and you know, and so this thing is out here. And literally hundreds of thousands of people have used this, and these are people that had, you know, difficulty, for example, walking. Just an issue of quality of life. Okay, that you end up being sedentary, and you just have trouble getting around. Well, you lay on this thing for 8 minutes a day, twice a day, and the effects last for at least 12 hours. That's why you do it twice a day, so 12 hours apart. And so you end up, you know, with example after example. This guy William Shatner, who just went up in this suborbital flight and was on all those Star Trek movies, TV shows. Shatner's had one of these for years, and he's 90 years old now, and he's still going at it. Okay, he swears by it. There's just in the area here over in Stanford. The former manager of the baseball team, the New York Mets, Bobby Valentine, has a demo thing for this beamer, because Bobby Valentine had neuropathy in both feet, and after 6 months of using this twice a day, it was completely gone. He said, this is for me. I want to go promote this and help people to have access to this sort of stuff. So these are just examples of, you know, there's all kinds of other competing products here, as you can see, and some of them go push into infrared, for example, or ultraviolet. There's all kinds of games people play there doing this stuff, but this is just an example of something that is viewed as quackery. Okay, that the Food and Drug Administration would fight allowing you to make any claim whatsoever about how these things might heal you, but they allow it to be a so-called medical device that, you know, you could go, for example, to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor would own this, and you'd go there and use it as a.
Are you using the term electromagnetic? Is
For
that
example, that's okay.
Is electromagnetic, when you say electromagnetic, is that the same as saying radio frequency in your parlance?
It's there's an actual typically cobalt iron toroid, okay, a donut, and then you wrap wires around that, okay, and when you send an electric current through it, that creates an electromagnetic field around this donut, okay, but they pulse it, okay. It isn't just a simple on off. It's pulsed, you know, as you saw down here, 10 to 30 times a second. So it really is an electromagnetic field, both electricity and magnetism. But it does this to torque. You know, let me see if I can pull up
some animation.
Yeah, there's let me see if I can find. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find an animation for you of.
Oh, I've seen the animation for electromagnetic, because it's the same. I think we're talking about the same thing, like transcranial electromagnetic treatment is electromagnetic treatment, radio frequency treatment of the brain. But I think that we're talking about a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, we are.
And yeah.
Hold on one sec. I just found, here we go. Hold on. I'm just trying to get through the ad in this YouTube video.
A long cold winter here in Jordan and across the world. Right now.
Okay, hold on. Okay, do you see this?
Yeah.
I don't hear anything. Let's
No.
see.
No.
Sounds on. Okay, so there's no, let's just watch it. You'll see. So this is the starting point. This on the left here, this is an artery, and this is a capillary coming off the artery, and this thing is a vein. So now you can see this is after 3 minutes or so. Things are starting to flow much better, especially in the capillary. The real point in this thing is 75% of your blood flow is in microcapillaries, like in your extremities, in your fingers and toes. So the help here is in your extremities. And here you can see stuff is really cooking. Okay.
One of the people that we're learning about this from is a woman whose feet were swollen up like balloons. They look like water balloons in photographs of her before pictures. And now they're incredibly skinny, long feet, that
Right.
She naturally has. And she stopped all of the medications that she was taking.
Yeah, this is just using the body to heal itself. You're just getting, okay.
She was on all kinds
Here's
of
the initial
medications
picture,
and still
okay.
swelled up.
And here's the after.
It's really rather amazing. So, I mean,
No drugs, no drugs whatsoever.
See, this would be like taking a variety of antennas and put on, off, meaning how they work. And that's pulsing.
Yeah.
That's what you mean by pulsing, right?
The pulsing is the I turn on the voltage and current.
It goes through a cycle.
And so and I'm doing this, if it's going for typically 8 minutes, so that's 60 seconds in a minute, 480 seconds, they break it out into 2-minute chunks. So the only difference is they increase the intensity going through the initial 2-minute chunk. Peak intensity is a low level. The next one, it gets a little higher. The next one, it gets a little higher. And then they go through a cool down period, a 2-minute cool down period. So the pulsing is really the electromagnetic field pulsing, which is just torquing the red blood cells and the muscles that are squeezing the blood to flow. Okay. There's electrons in those muscles, so the muscles get stimulated.
You can feel it. It's a very mild, pleasant sensation.
Yeah.
I think, but if you're sensitive, you can definitely feel it.
Yeah, there's a guy I came across in Spokane, Washington, who's had this thing for, the company's been around 25 years, so he's been doing this at least 10, 15 years, but he's an ophthalmologist and he uses it to cure glaucoma. So just by putting this around your eyes, you get blood flow and the glaucoma disappears.
We've been trying to share it with the eye doctor that we both have.
Yeah. So these are just examples of, again, getting the body these are things the body can achieve all by itself. This is just a little help for it to let it do these things.
Right.
And it leads to a quality of life that you're much more mobile. You're not, doubled over at age 70 or whatever. You can, you're Shatner at age 90 going into suborbital flight, you know. So anyway,
We hope to get one soon. If we do, we'll be happy to share it with you. And if you're interested, we could take you down to Bobby Valentine's space down in Stanford. Or we hope to get one the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We'd be
Cool.
happy to make a
Yeah.
house call.
yeah, it's just an example of I mean, again, I think things have swung too far in one direction, and we're just trying to propose something that's very simple and rudimentary.
Apparently, Reiki practitioners really like it, and they will often include it in a session. They'll either start it off or end it off with one of these mats.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like Reiki to me, but I guess I would say somewhat stronger.
Yeah.
I was doing it a lot before I went into the hospital. I would have done it more if I could have.
I kept getting thrown off. That's why I had to move rooms and get hooked back in. But when you were talking about sentience and artificial intelligence, were you actually saying that at a certain level, when artificial intelligence goes beyond, and you said that's the end of humanity, are you suggesting that computers will be able to feel emotions?
Well, this is why I started off with this discussion of emergent phenomena, that video there.
Right.
Things are emerging. Right now, these computers are not what we would call sentient or conscious, but collectively, they could become sentient or conscious, and then they would be writing their own software much faster than we could write it, and it would work. And God knows what
So
they would be doing.
Like how who wouldn't open the door?
Well, they're starting to do these hybrid things now with human brain cells. And
Well, yeah, there's an interface where you can think, and the thinking will allow you to program the computer in some sense.
Really?
So that sort of stuff is going on. But this is you know, again, it's what we're dealing with here. I thought you posed a good question by saying, what about sentience and consciousness? I'm trying to give you some idea of how little we know or how much we know or whatever,
Right.
because it borders on philosophy, and it borders on a lot of things that are at the frontiers of knowledge. And we just don't have sharp answers to these things right now.
Well, since we're on the topic of consciousness, I just like to bring in another dimension, and this is basically the dimension that Ron, my brother, brought into the study of subatomic particles. I just wanted to bring in the idea that when you're a meditator like he was and myself, you see these levels of reality and awareness that have considerable understandings of the universe that nobody knows about yet. Ron is a classic example of that. But he also could look at somebody's mind, and he could look into previous lives and tell you what happened. Things like that. I just want to bring in this other dimension.
Sure.
From the inner perspective. The Western world is more interested in the outer perspective, and connecting things and proving things right or wrong, or and bringing some really fantastic scientific understandings of the world and stuff like that. But there's this other dimension of the inner that is also extremely expansive.
And just to pick up on that, you know, Ron, in one of his lives was incarnated in the same time period as Jesus of Nazareth. And he always felt that this was an exceptional person who was able to live on and see reality on many different levels beyond, you know, what other people could. And, you know, for example, he had this ability to just cure people of all of these diseases and illnesses. Hundreds of people apparently were cured by him just in passing. It's just something that he threw off as a gift to people to help them out. But there were many other things that he dealt with that we're not aware of, that were probably you know, incredibly enlightening. I keep picking up that he actually did have a set of lectures that Mary Magdalene was the one that collected them, and this was collected into something called the Path of Joy, or the Book of Joy, which became the basis for, if you were to daily try and capture and practice what he was talking about, you would go look at pieces of this, and that would focus you on these things. But it was at a higher level, and I think that's what Ron really appealed, was the notion of compassion and love, and how he was able to convey this to other people, not just for themselves, but to have compassion and love for other people that were clearly flawed in so many different ways, and to help them out. So
and he, as a person, I think even in the Bible, much less in writings that didn't make the cut, he was always saying, you know, you can do what I do. He was just more involved. He was just more involved.
He said that it's all within you, that you can do anything that I can do, and that you know, the only I'm sure if we went to the Vatican archives in the sub basements, we'd find what he actually, you know, some shreds of something that he actually wrote, and start to appreciate who he was. But all we have for now are these gospels with the notion of these parables, because the parables were intended for people that literally couldn't read or write, but they were very compelling stories that reached a lot of people. But he clearly could go far beyond that, and that's what we're missing out on.
And that's what it seems, that certain faiths, like religious science, you know, not Christian science, but religious science, is a lot about healing and how the mind can be used in that way, in all the ways that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
And prayer, the phenomenon of prayer.
Yeah, prayer, meditation, how important these things are, and sensing, as Bruce said, there's many different levels, different, and each of us is going to view things differently. So we have a long ways to go.
I think we've probably lost a lot
There she is.
that we used to have. That was common.
I just kept it off because it was just so bad, but I did come back in here and it was a little better.
Well, we ran a optical fiber to the house.
It must be when people are, the bandwidth's
helped.
being used at night by a lot of people. I don't know what it is, but not people in my house, but just around. It's been fine all day.
It's Netflix. Yeah, Netflix, and people are, you know, looking at, you know, sports, and they're looking at, you know, fill in the blank. This is peak time right now.
Right.
The first ones on our road to have it, we never had any problem. But it's getting more and more what we're getting more and more interference. As
Yeah.
more
It's,
people are using it.
they don't really understand how to engineer this yet, so we'll see. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Thank you for posing this, Patty, as a topic, and it's something that we really didn't treat. Not that we're just trying to show you how little we know, or where the real frontiers are in this that are pushing people, and it's interesting.
I
You
think
see,
it's got to be one of the most profound questions, what consciousness is.
but the notion of having information, which Ron observed, and having computers, which Wolfram has been pushing, and the algorithms that go with it, is what's underlying everything. You know, there could be something to that, but we'll have to see. We're not there yet. So
You have to wonder what happens to people when they get into advanced dementia states. So what kind of consciousness differences are there?
we'll ask Bruce.
It-
Bruce is right here. Bruce has achieved enlightenment.
Well,
You don't go very
yeah.
far.
Well, I know what it's like not to have a self, and it's very different.
What's different, Bruce?
Well, my main experience is I experience heart mind. I feel I can directly perceive love in anyone's mind. Everyone has this love reality that they're not aware of, and it's a fundamental reality of the universe, because I can see it in animals and even insects. It's just a perception that I have. So that's it has a lot of consequences in terms of consciousness, because the first thing that arises immediately is compassion. When you see somebody suffering, you instantly go into compassion. So it's an element of consciousness that comes naturally when you don't have a self, basically. The other main aspect of it is that there's a kind of an intricate understanding of the universe that's already in the mind. Like there's an understanding that's already reality. Now it's expansive and goes forever, and I have only experienced maybe 1% of it, but I can sense that it's there. So there's an understanding from the deeper levels of the mind that are there. And everyone has that. Everyone has that intelligence. It's not separate from anyone. Everyone has it. And then you have the evolution of consciousness from, different perspectives. One of them is the human. And it's like an understanding of in a sense, the reality of consciousness that is very expansive. But it just feels normal. Like it's just, when you don't have a self, that kind of consciousness arises naturally. We call it natural mind in Buddhism.
When you don't have a self, is that what you would just say?
Correct. Yeah. This is one of the problems with kind of advanced Buddhism, is they talk about non-duality, no subject object, and things like that. And the problem is that it's not within anyone's or most people's experience. So that makes it very hard to talk about and very hard to teach about. But that's a fundamental nature of consciousness. And the problem is having a self, because then that distorts everything. The big one is subject object. You think everything is separate from you, but you're actually not separate from anything at all. you're already in union with the universe and everything around you. That's the nature of consciousness. So it's, things like that. Anyway.
The problem with it is using these English words and metaphors to describe this. So one metaphor is that when you achieve this, then you're stepping out of the movie that you're in, and you're now out in the audience, looking up at the movie screen to see the reality play that you're in, and you realize how much more there is all around you. You're in the movie theater, you go out the movie theater, look at all the other things out here, but you thought you were doing everything. The other reason why I kept pushing Jung with his collective unconsciousness was Ron seeing this information everywhere, so that when you link up with this information, which is everywhere, that you yourself lose yourself in it, because you're now linked up to this collective unconsciousness that permeates the entire universe, and you're just not there as a self. You're now participating in this thing, as part of the algorithms and so forth. But that's the problem. These are metaphors. This is the real deal is what Bruce is talking about. Actually working at it to get to achieve enlightenment, and only then will you say, "Oh, now I see what's going on." But I'm just trying to capture, to give you a flavor of what it might be like. But I think these are they don't really go all the way to getting the job done.
So much to talk about.
Yep.
We could go on and on.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, let's call it a night. Have a good. We'll see you next week. We'll see what we do. Have a good. Enjoy.
Okay.
Bye-bye.